Refrigerant recovery is the foundation for life cycle refrigerant management, as without safe refrigerant recovery, there cannot be reclamation or reuse. A-Gas Rapid Recovery is an on-site refrigerant recovery service that gives businesses an easy way to contain their used refrigerants.
Not a whole lot of companies do what we do. We handle some of the grunt work that they don't want to do, and we can do it 10 times as fast as they can. The recovery portion, the cylinder exchanges, and buying back used material that otherwise can't be used.
We play a big role with our contractors, whether that be HVAC, mechanical, or demolition contractors. Our whole purpose is to get on site and not only help them save money in the project, but offer an environmental solution.
We do not want any of these products getting vented to atmosphere, no matter how low the GWP is. Now it's not only the cylinder to recover the product, but it's making sure the technicians have equipment that are rated to work with flammable gases. That's really important for people.
So by us being able to contain it in cylinders, reclaim it, we're saving the environment one recovery at a time.
My name is Mike Idle. Today I wanted to give you an overview of Amatrol's T7300 HVAC control system. This system is designed to align a hands-on workstation, as you see here, along with interactive curriculum to teach the operation, installation, application, and troubleshooting of control systems related to the HVAC industry. As components and features of HVAC systems get smarter in both the residential and commercial fields, it's important for current and future HVAC technicians to be trained up. What types of circuits are used, familiarity, learning, operation, maintenance, troubleshooting are all important areas to cover in that.
Here at NAVAC, we are obsessed with delivering the best HVAC tools on the market. Our tools are built for professionals and engineered for precision, just like Harley-Davidson motorcycles. NAVAC Nation, it's time for you to feel the power both on and off the job site. Let's stand up in our pursuit of perfection. From coast to coast, NAVAC forges the path forward. Wherever you are, we will be right beside you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again on Did You Know, the ESCO HVAC show. And yeah, definitely let us know where you're joining in from. As you can tell, I'm in a different location this week. I'm actually hanging out at the Barn Dominium. So we closed on the old house in both of those offices on Monday. I've got about a 3.5 week layover before we move into the next house. The mobile studio I've got packed up with all of our goodies from all of our sponsors and all of our books and the content that we take along with us on the road. So it is packed to the hilt right now, but we'll be using it for shows here in the next few weeks. So look forward to that. And by the way, while we're talking about the show on the road, I'm going to share real quick for those of you who have not been over to the site and seen the newest webpage that we have for Did You Know. We have a full page that has everything that we're doing. It has all of our live shows. It has the podcast. And we've also got a rotating calendar showing you all of the locations that we're going to be taking the show on the road to. And if you're an educator at a school, or if you're a contractor or a distributor or manufacturer of equipment and you want us to stop by, let us know, and we'll see if we can't fit that into our schedule. We look forward to seeing all of you along the way. Mr. Kasha joining in. Thank you, sir. And for those that don't know, Steve Kasha is one of my earliest of mentors in this industry. I can remember hanging out at the National HVACR Education Conference with Steve going, Steve, you think I've got it to keep doing this kind of stuff? Because I'm not sure about all of this. And so he was such a a great inspiration of having faith in myself and pushing myself into new places. And Steve's been through all of it. So fantastic guy. Glad to have you here. Professor Silberstein joining us from sunny Florida today. I imagine it's sunny in Florida. It's almost never not sunny in Florida. Kendrick joining us as well. Hey, Kendrick, you're on this show like every week. You've got to join us sometime and hop on the show and hang out, man. We'd love to have you on here. We appreciate you hanging out. Murph joining us from the Jersey Shore. So today we're going to dive into something that's going to be important for all of us. Most of us instructors, trainers, educators, most of us came from the field, and we were most likely, you were good at what you did in the field, and you had a lot of knowledge in your brain, and you typically worked with just a few people on the site, and that was giving them feedback on what you did, because they just were glad that it was up and running, right? And they were sad that they had to write the check for the bill. That was about it. So when we move into the classroom, that dynamic changes completely. Our resources that we used to have most likely don't exist anymore. Even if our resources was working with the manufacturer, we're now working with probably a different department. We're not working with technical support. We might be working with the training and education side. So when we're in the classroom, it's important for us to empower ourselves with the tools to make us successful. So today we're spending some time with Carolyn Mako from Cengage. How are you, Carolyn?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here.
This is an exciting time in the HVAC and refrigeration building sciences industries. We have so many new products that are coming aboard. We have new refrigerants. There's technologies that many educators have never even worked with in the classroom. So the more tools we can empower ourselves with and the more knowledge, the better we are going to be as mentors of the minds that we are teaching. That's what we're doing. We are mentoring this next generation of technicians. So Carolyn did a class that I think you all are going to enjoy, and we're going to do an abbreviated version of that. And if you want the whole thing, you got to keep coming back to the National HVACR Education Conference or go to one of her longer version classes of it. But I think we're going to fit most of it in that. So Carolyn, before we dive into the actual content, give us a little bit of your background and share with us your passion in the industry.
Sure. Yeah. So as Clifton mentioned, my name is Carolyn Mako, and I'm here representing Cengage. So currently I am an associate editorial.
I'm sorry, that was my fault.
That's okay. And I manage the HVAC, electrical, and plumbing list here at Cengage. So primarily what that means is I make a lot of decisions around what we choose to revise every year, where we're investing from a content perspective, and trying to understand what do our future technicians need and what kind of content support are they looking for, as well as, what kinds of resources can we provide to help support the instructors actually teach that content. So whether that's activities or assessments, things of that nature. But before coming into this role, I was formerly a learning designer, also at Cengage. And then prior to that, I was actually a K-12 educator. So I used to do social studies back in the day. So yeah, so I've had many lives, but so my background and passion really is in education and teaching. And that's really what my background is in. And so when I had this opportunity to come onto the trades list, I was so excited here at Cengage because it was a world that, I'd never really been invested in necessarily. I didn't know a ton about, but I was welcomed with open arms, and I learned just, how much support and growth and opportunity there is here, and just what the future has in store for those that are currently in this market, but those that are considering this market as a future career path for them. And, I think for me, since moving into this role, my passion has really been about how do we provide the best resources we can to support our instructors and make them feel as supported as I did when I came into this position, and understanding, while I might not have the technical background, I have the education background. So how do we work together to train the future generation of HVAC technicians and what that looks like?
Yeah, that is so important, because that really is like the other half of who a technician is not when we come into the classroom. A lot of administration, when they look at those applications for instructors, they assume that technician has educational experience. And the reality is we may or may not have any delivery experience. We may have went to a technical school for the technical education and learned fundamentals, but the actual speaking and delivering and managing people from different generations and different ethnicities, that is not a easy thing to do. And so you have to equip yourself with the proper tools and skill sets. And that's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Let's dive into this. I look forward to it. Along the way, if anyone has any questions, let us know in the chat. And anyone that has not gotten onto their phone or their computer or their tablet and let us know where you're joining from, please do. You're a part of this community, and we encourage you to participate. We want you here. All right, where do we begin?
Yeah, so let's jump in. So really today's focus, what I really want to highlight and talk about is really thinking about, some of it's going to talk about some theory, some educational theory, some educational background, and how do we define what makes an authentic learning experience and how do we assess that? And how do we support students and future learners to kind of build on those skills and knowledge in a way that supports them, but also helps achieve those larger overarching goals that's going to make them successful in their profession. So I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of how we do that. And then we'll talk about some strategies that you might be able to take away with and use, over the next few days, over the next few weeks. And, and some of this might already be things that you're doing, but just maybe this is how do we think about it differently.
There we go. I like that approach.
Yeah. So one of the first things that you'll hear a lot about in the world of education is this idea of backwards design. A lot of times when we go into education, we think about the content I have to teach, right? I have to get through all of these different pieces of equipment they have to learn. We have to understand the formulas and the functions of technology and how all these things work together, and as well as how to communicate with customers, right? And all these things that make up your curriculum. But before you can really do that, the beginning step is to identify what are your actual goals, right? Yeah. What do you hope that your students are going to be able to know or do by the time they finish a lesson, a unit, an entire program, right? What does that look like? And that sets the stage for how you develop the rest of what you do. And so once you've developed those goals, the next piece is, okay, well, now I know what I want them to do. How do I assess that, right? How do I know that at the end of the day, they've actually achieved what I've said they're going to achieve or be able to do? And so, an example of that is, if your objective is, I want them to be able to convert between Celsius and Fahrenheit and back, that's my goal. How do I assess that? Maybe I give them a table that shows their ability to convert between the different temperature measurements, right? Because they have to actually apply that skill and show me how they're doing that process to complete the table, to complete the assignment.
Makes sense. Absolutely. Right? Okay.
Then the third piece is where we actually get to the instruction, right? So you've already completed some of the two most difficult steps, as far as I'm concerned, with setting your goals and actually making the assessments. And now it's, okay, how does the content that I know I have to teach fit into that?
That's
and how do I present it, right? What way do I do a lecture? Am I doing demos? Am I using videos? What kinds of activities am I having them do throughout this to get all that kind of experience?
This is probably the most common question that we get at ESCO from new educators, first-year educators coming right out of the field to go into the classroom. Like at our conference, we had an abundance of first-year educators that were registered. And when we start having these conversations, it's almost always this. They go, okay, I know how to show someone how to make a flare. I can make a test to see if they learned what I want to teach them. But what do I actually teach? Like, what do I do? Do I just show them? That's probably not good enough. Do I use books? What do I do so that it all works? So that step right there is probably, at least for me, one of the most challenging and many other educators.
And, the thing is, I think one of the things it's always important to keep in mind is there is no right answer. And I think that's the beauty of education, right? That you you have students and you have individuals coming into your classroom that are coming from all different backgrounds, all different perspectives, and that's going to impact how they show up in your classroom. And the key is if you show and you present information in a lot of different formats, chances are it's going to connect with somebody, right? So whether you're having them read a chapter from a textbook, or whether you're showing them a video, or whether you're demoing something in the class, when you put all of those things together, that creates a perfect way to piece it all. And those students are going to choose which format makes the most sense to them.
Absolutely. Completely see that. I didn't when I first started working with students, but it's definitely become something I'm more aware of as I've gotten more experiences. Having those different delivery methods is pretty important.
Yeah. And as different generations change and they learn in different ways, right? It's always forcing us to think outside the box about how we're choosing to present that content. And so the last piece of this, right, is so you're presenting this instruction, and the key is that you're adding in these intervals of short little assessments throughout that process. So you're not waiting until the end of a unit to necessarily assess them on all this content you've presented. And the way I like to think about this is it doesn't have to be some cumbersome task, right? It can be something as simple as, I used to call them exit tickets. So at the end of a lesson, before they could leave my classroom, or whether it was digital or in person, I would pose a question to them on the board, and they'd either on a sticky note have to write their response with their name on it and stick it on the door on their way out, or post it on some digital board, right?
Yeah.
Like Padlet is like a great resource that I used to use all the time. And it's a great way for me to check, okay, did they get the main idea for today? Did they understand that lesson? And then it would influence how I showed up the next day, right? And okay, do I have to reteach something because clearly they didn't get it? Like clearly the way I presented it maybe just didn't sink in. So how do I think about this differently? And it's those types of small little low stakes assessments, as we call them, that to me is what creates the journey along the way. And it allows you as an instructor to pivot and realize you don't have to be perfect. You're learning just as much as they are. And the more you learn from them, the more they're going to learn from you. And it's just part of that never ending cycle.
That is one of the best pieces of advice I have heard in a long time for reviewing my own content. So every educator out there, you need to go take stock in sticky notes right now. And as I'm out traveling, I want to see your door covered with those sticky notes before you take them down each day. That's going to be quite interesting.
And it all translates back to this idea of feedback, right?
Yeah.
So whether it's feedback that's coming from you as the instructor, or it's coming from your students, or your students giving feedback to each other, giving feedback to their peers, it's all part of this. It's just engaging in this larger conversation of we're all learning this together. So let's help each other by correcting misunderstandings and asking questions and just being curious about what we're learning and recognizing that, as I'm going through this process, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm learning these really technical, complex concepts, and asking for feedback and getting that insight is only going to make it better and help me improve in my journey.
Man, I love that. That's great.
Yeah. So now we take it to, okay, what does this actually sort of look like, right? How do you build on these levels of knowledge when you're thinking about, okay, I have to present definitions, but ultimately I have to get them to this point where they're working on a system, a unit that they have to figure out what's wrong with it, troubleshoot it, and then ultimately fix it and get it back up and running again, right? So how do I get from step 1 all the way to step 6, for example? And so that's where this idea of Bloom's taxonomy comes into play. And this really sets the framework for how we build on that progressive learning. So let's dive into these different levels. So we're going to start with the level of remember. And really what this is about is just recalling information. So I'm going to use an example of a screwdriver throughout this demo, just to kind of give you an example of how this builds on itself. So you lay out a series of tools on a table in front of me, and you ask me, okay, find the Phillips head screwdriver, right? My ability to demonstrate my remember category of learning is I can identify that Phillips head screwdriver. I can look at it and I can say, that's what that is. And I can recall what that piece of equipment is.
Very basic level of understanding.
Very basic level. It's often memorization, right? Recall. And then where we get to the next level is now I have to demonstrate my understanding of it. So can I explain in my own words what that Phillips head screwdriver is used for? Can I explain how it would be used, how to hold it, right? How to manipulate it, in what situations it might be relevant. And so again, still a little bit of memorization and recall, but not, it's requiring me to think a little bit deeper about the complexities of that particular piece of equipment.
All right, we got a timeout just for a second.
Yeah.
You got me thinking so much. We need a visual. I'll be right back. I'm going to get a screwdriver.
All right.
We're going
I love
to add
it.
some definition to this. Okay, no tool shaming out there from my dirty Klein screwdriver, everybody. Oh, okay, so I remember that this is the shape of this.
Mm-hmm.
This would be something used to work with a screw.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, I don't need to know more than this.
Right, exactly. That's as far as you've gotten.
Okay.
Now where we jump to the next level is this application. So can you show me how to use it on a piece of equipment?
Oh, maybe. I don't know yet.
Maybe.
Might need some clarification or
distance, right?
Understanding what this thing does. And so if I'm taught that it can be used to work with a screw, to turn a screw in or to turn a screw out, then I've learned some function of this thing.
Right. And the question is, can you identify what type of screw you're supposed to use with it, right? And then when you're inserting it into something, how to actually secure something into place, how to secure that screw into place.
Okay, I got it.
Right? So these three levels to me, and you just demonstrated this expertly, so I appreciate that, is where we often have the most level of support and guidance, right? It requires the most level of instruction, sort of hands-on learning or coaching, especially when we get to this application level, right? So once you're working on that piece of equipment, and maybe it's the first time they've ever been exposed to it, that's where you're walking them through, okay, here's how to use it, right? If you're seeing this in the field, here's how to demonstrate it. And that might be you demonstrating it. It might be one of their peers demonstrating it for them.
Okay, so we're actually physically going to do this. And Mohammed, thank you so much for joining us from Iran. Glad to have you here with us. This is a welcoming space, and I hope that you learn from us today.
So then we get into the analyze level, and here's where things get a little bit stickier, let's say, right? It starts to get a bit more complex. We're putting the glasses on to really focus.
Yeah.
So here's where you might be working on a piece of equipment, right? You're trying to figure out what's wrong and you're trying to solve the problem. The step is, can I identify which tool I'm supposed to use? So in this case, it's the Phillips head screwdriver. And can I apply it correctly in that specific instance, right? So it's a little bit more getting into the problem solving piece and the critical thinking piece, because now you've demonstrated that you know how to use it, but do you know when to use it, right? In a specific situation.
Yeah, because now it could be a different size. It could be a loose fit. It could be the wrong type. It could be too much torque or not enough torque, the wrong direction. I could be bending and not using it centered as it was designed to be.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're getting deeper into the detail, the knowledge base.
Right. And this is really where, you start to let them take control of their own learning, right? Because they've demonstrated their ability to apply these skills and this knowledge that you've taught them. And while that means that you still provide guidance, it's more you're sort of sitting back, observing them and letting them think through it and really sort of experiment just as they would in the field, right? If they're troubleshooting on a piece of equipment.
Okay.
So then we get to this evaluate phase. And this is really where now you've demonstrated that you can apply it in a given situation. Can you then explain to me or justify why that was the right choice, why that was the right piece of equipment to use, and how it solved the problem that you were trying to fix?
So I can then, because I've been able to analyze differences, and I can now know this screwdriver so well that I can distinguish it between another really nasty Klein screwdriver. By the way, these are my really, really old Klein screwdrivers that got used on an epoxy installation that I didn't know would leave my tools so nasty. So for all those haters out there going, oh, boo, that's a Klein screwdriver. I know they had broken tips before I used them, just so you're aware. But now I have understood these screwdrivers to the point to where I can evaluate if this can be used or would it need to be able to go to something completely different.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And can I explain why I made that decision to somebody else?
Right. Okay.
And then the last level is, okay, we've put it all together. I've followed all the steps. I've followed the procedures. I've now fixed, presumably, whatever it was that needed to be fixed. And it's fully operational and functioning once again. And I can then modify or adjust as needed, as you were talking about, like really deciphering, well, this is a Phillips head screwdriver, but is it the right Phillips head screwdriver, right? And then finally coming to, full circle and being able to have a fully functioning piece of equipment once again.
Because this broken tip screwdriver didn't serve much purpose. And I didn't even need to know it was broken when we were just introducing it, like in the Remember and Understand. But by the time I get to the Create, I might have fully understood and evaluated the screwdriver to the point where I go, you know what? During that evaluation, we realized that because it was broken, it had an incorrect tip size. It wouldn't fit the screw. So maybe I can go to a grinder and actually correct that, and it could be purposed into a useful screwdriver again. That's pretty advanced, though.
Mm-hmm. Very advanced. And here's the thing, right? So like I presented this in a very linear fashion, right? We used a simple example to explain how to flow through this. But really, it's not meant to be linear, right? Because ultimately, you might get to this level of application and recognize, oh, maybe I didn't really understand all of the uses of that particular piece of equipment and how it could apply to a situation. Think of it like a video game, right? So you can't move to the next level until you've passed the level before, right? And sometimes you might have to play that level 10 times before you finally have figured it out and it's made sense. And I think when we think about how this applies in day-to-day classroom, I think it's really this big jump between the application and the analysis piece. And I think that's the hardest step a lot of times that instructors and students really struggle with, is how do I get them from this application where they're just starting out, experimenting with this equipment, using it in the field, to like actually applying it to a situation that they're most likely going to encounter when they're out in the field working with customers.
Yeah, because if we skip any of those steps, we may not understand what all that training is if we go straight up to the Create. Like if I took that first year student and I said, oh, take this broken screwdriver and go make it work for me. There's a grinder over there.
Right.
It might come back as an ice pick.
Well, and when you're talking about working with equipment like this, you're also risking safety, right?
Yes.
Because then you're putting safety both of the individual, but also damaging potentially very expensive equipment that you don't necessarily have a lot of access to normally. So, there's a lot of complexities that go into that. And, it's taking the time, right, to support those students. And we're going to talk about what that looks like in a little bit, but really supporting them through that journey so that we're not skipping those steps and we're making sure that we're feeling comfortable with where they are at each level based on the assessments that we're giving them before we progress to that next step.
Very cool. Makes a lot of sense, especially as a technician, because if I feel like my job is to give back to the student what I know, I may jump straight to evaluate or create, not realizing they don't know anything underneath of it.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
All right. So let's talk about how we kind of get there, right? To this idea of building on knowledge, building on skills, and this idea, we refer to it as scaffolded learning. So think of it kind of like a ladder, right? So how do you make your way up the rungs, building one step at a time to ultimately get to the top of where you're trying to get to and achieve those goals? And so when we think about what this means, the first step is we know that there is so much information that has to be covered in such a short period of time, right? And so the first task is really understanding, how do I break some of this content into more manageable chunks? How do I prevent what we call information overload, right? So presenting too much information at one time that it's just not possible for me to really understand the different facets of it that are important and make it less overwhelming to digest and understand. So thinking starting small, working big, right? So getting through those foundational levels of understanding when we talk about definitions or just core concepts. And then once you feel that that foundation is there, then you can present more content that's more complex in nature.
I like it.
And that's where we come into providing ways to sort of build that knowledge and presenting this content in different ways. And we'll talk a little bit about what this could look like. But, as we think about the next generation, we joke a lot that they're the TikTok generation, right? They're the video generation. And so the way that they learn is going to be very different than you or I have previously learned in a classroom setting, right? And understanding that and recognizing that, there's just different ways to present this content is just part of that journey that we're on. And it goes along with recognizing that just like all of us sitting on this call right now are all unique individuals that come from different backgrounds and have learned and come on this journey in different ways, so have your students, and that's going to impact how they're going to learn. And so by putting all of these things together, you're recognizing that they're learning at their own pace, but they can also take control of their own learning, right? If you give them the tools to do that,
right,
then they can go on their journey to reach the same goal at the end of the day.
I want to make sure to reach out to any educators that are joining us today or watching this later. If you feel like you're struggling in the classroom, if you know that you're comfortable with the content, but you don't think that the class is receiving it, this is a great way to relook at your delivery, because you've got the right content. How it is being delivered to your audience is sometimes the things that we need to learn how to do better. And that's what Carolyn is here doing with us today, helping you understand how to deliver your content better. You may not have to redo your content. You may just have to understand the delivery method of it.
Exactly. Beautifully said. And, so then when we talk about what this looks like, and we've talked a little bit about this. I don't want to spend too much time on this middle column here, but the idea is, right, that it's a fluid structure. So you can't just go one direction. I mean, some students they'll master it and they will get it, but most won't. And there's this process of learning and relearning and coming back and reinforcing concepts and looking at things from a different angle and learning and understanding it and teaching it in a different way and recognizing that it's this fluid structure. But it's these last three bullets that to me really set the framework of understanding that the goal is to go from guided to independent learning, so that if you present all the content and you present it in a way that is relatable and it's understandable and you're giving them examples to work with and you're coaching them and guiding them through various different ways and giving them feedback along that journey, ultimately they'll get to that point where they are able to troubleshoot on their own and they are able to do these things, and you feel confident about sending them out into the field and responding to various service calls that they have to respond to, right? Or going and working for different companies. And the way to kind of do that and the way to assess where they are in that journey is offering a variety and a bunch of different types of assessments. For me personally, I was not a great test taker. Like if you gave me a multiple choice exam, to me, that was not a way for me to demonstrate my knowledge. I mean, no matter how hard I studied, I would do okay, but it may not come across that I really knew the content that well. But if you asked me to do some kind of hands-on assignment or a project or a presentation or write a paper, that's where I was really going to show you my ability to understand what you taught me. And so even though we have to offer all types of assessments, right? You can't just use one assessment platform. When you offer a variety, it gives you a better picture of where students are because of how they're going to perform on different types of assessments.
Sure, absolutely. Wow. Professor Silverstein always has a analogy that sometimes seems out of place, but makes so much sense. And that is a perfect one. Our knowledge are our beans. Beans are beans. It's all about how you label the can. And when you think about what's trying to be said there, it truly is, we need to just understand the content that we have, make sure that it is correct. And then we can present it in a way that is readable to others.
Exactly. And so a lot of times, this gets misunderstood too, right? This idea of, this just means I have to water down my content or I have to make it easier to understand. And that's not really true. It's really thinking about what is it that is the most important for them to be able to take away? And how do I present that in a way that's relatable to them? And to me, that's not watering it down. It's just presenting it in a different way and looking at it through a different light.
Yeah, so true. Good point, Todd. I mean, that's exactly what we're saying is that, everyone learns and tests differently. And what worked good for me as a learner may not work good for my audience.
Mm-hmm. And, these things, we talk about a lot of these things, and they're not exclusive to struggling students. That may be where it presents the most opportunity. But when you also think about your more advanced students that are excelling, what I love about this sort of model is once they've reached that highest level of learning, right, and they've demonstrated that, and maybe they've demonstrated that at a fairly rapid pace, they can then take their learning to the next level. Maybe they're able to explore something that you might not have had time to cover with everybody else in the class, but they can now challenge themselves to that next step. And whereas your students that need more time and need more support have the space and the growth and the time to do that to still end at the same goal at the end of the day.
Love it.
All right. So let's talk about what does this actually look like? Like, what are some things that I can actually take away and use in my classroom tomorrow that are going to help me do this? Like, what does this look like in day to day in terms of how I'm assessing my students? So I've just sort of outlined a summary here. I'm going to go into each of what these are. But essentially, I'm going to break these different types of activities into the Bloom's categories that we talked about earlier to show you how they connect and then ultimately build on themselves throughout, let's say, a program or a course to ideally get to the point where everyone's at the same level of I have reached that create, evaluate, and create level, and I'm at that goal of independent learning. So we're going to start with, let's take a jump back to the 10 minutes ago, and let's talk about this remember category once again. So when we come back here, as you might recall, no pun intended, but the goal is to find ways for students to recall information, right? So this might be definitions, formula, equipment identification. And so two resources that I think are really great for this. One is videos. Videos are a great way to, when you're talking about concepts that might be hard to visualize, I often think about trying to understand the flow of electricity, right? It's not something you can really see or necessarily understand, but you can show it in a video, and that gives you a visual of, oh, that's how that works, or that's how that operates. And it gives you a better sense of, I'm connecting this content that I've read and I've learned, but now I have this visual representation to go along with it. And, we hear it all the time from instructors that students don't read, right? They don't want to read the textbook. And I get that, right? It feels overwhelming. It's dense, it's technical, right? But if you balance that with presenting this content in a different way, like using videos, it sort of supplements that so that even if they haven't read the whole chapter, this is helping to support getting across those main ideas.
Absolutely. Some of the best homework we could ever assign.
Exactly. And there's so much content out there. I mean, that you can get your hands on and have access to that helps demonstrate and support all of these things.
Absolutely.
The other piece to this is practice tests. So when I talked earlier about the idea of like low stakes assignments, right? This is an opportunity where these types of auto-graded multiple choice questions are really going to highlight, their ability to recall definitions or, how do I understand, the relationship between X and Y. And it's designed for them to assess themselves with ideally built-in feedback, right? That either says, oh, that's not quite right. Maybe go back to this section and relearn this content. Or for you as the instructor to provide that feedback and look at it and go, okay, they keep getting this question wrong. What am I missing here? Like, what has not made sense to them in this journey?
Sure.
So then when we take this to the understand level, right, we remember that this really covers the ability to explain, right? So to be able to put in your own words rather than restate necessarily what you've memorized. So one way to do this, essay questions, open-ended. Sometimes they can be opinion-based because that's a great way for you to assess how they're performing, right?
What are they learning?
Exactly. Like, okay, well, why is all this safety information that I'm learning going to have an impact on me in the workplace, right? Like being able for them to explain how this is going to affect them in their day-to-day life and why it should matter to them is an example of to demonstrate how they understand it. And similar here, we incorporate tools to really help instructors on this side of things to help, okay, here's like a sample answer of what you might be looking for a student to have, right? This would tell you that they've understood the question, but they've also understood the content and how to explain it back to you.
Could I also use like 4-part multiple choice, but they were all completely different scenarios in that function for understanding, just to see if they're actually captioning the content, like maybe change some of the wording, like if it was a screwdriver and to tighten it, I would turn it to the right. But one of my answers could be I would tighten it, I would turn it to the left, just to see if they're getting the concept.
Sure. And if they're picking up on those nuances, right? Those like sort of niche, minute details that if they're not really taking the time to read the question, right, they might miss that small difference in a word. And that's going to make all the difference. And, sometimes there's different theories on that as to whether or not well, is that really assessing it? But it's also teaching them to take your time and read what's in front of you. And I think that that's applicable, not just in the classroom, but I think that's going to be applicable to their day-to-day life too.
Awesome.
Another example, and I sort of alluded to this a little bit, but is this idea of different types of lab exercises. And this one's really more of a knowledge assessment. But what I like about this one is I think it perfectly demonstrates how these ideas of remember and understand overlap and they become multiple parts, right? So in the beginning of this assignment, it's asking students to recall safety concerns and considerations. So that might be something they've just memorized, right? But the second part of this is these review questions are asking them to justify the importance of these safety considerations and the impact that it's going to have on them in the workplace. So it forces them to recall that information, but then takes it to the next level by having them analyze it a little bit more deeply.
Man, this is really helping as we're designing our course curriculum and the assessments along the way. Where do we begin? We begin at the basics. Are they understanding the basics before they move forward?
Exactly. So now is when we get into the fun stuff, right? The application and then this sort of higher level of learning. So these types of assessments are opportunities for students to apply it in a lower stakes environment. So this initial application is, chances are this is the first time they've been exposed to these types of situations. So it's hard to expect that they're going to, be perfect, right, at using this piece of equipment or fixing this, unit or being able to perfectly interact with a customer in a situation you might give them. And so when we use these, this is an opportunity for them to try it and experiment and explore, obviously within the safety that you can create, but knowing that there's going to need to be a lot of support and guidance through this, including a lot of step-by-step directions.
Yeah, great opportunity to take that screwdriver and go remove a screw for me.
Exactly. One of my favorite types of activities, and I love these because I think they give you a lot of freedom and flexibility with how you can do them. So these are service calls. And essentially the goal of these is I'm going to present you with a scenario and with a customer, right? So a customer's reached out to you. They've told you what's wrong with this piece of equipment. And now you're going to have to respond to them, go through the series of processes, and then ultimately wrap up your work and explain, why you did what you did. And what I love about this is you can make this into a role play activity, right? So I'm going to pick 2 students out, make them a little uncomfortable. I think that's always a fun thing to do, right? And okay, play this out. One of you is the technician, the other is the customer. How would you go about this situation? And what are the steps you would take? And what I think is great about this is that once they go through it, once they get past that awkwardness, right, and they just sort of embrace the situation, it's also an opportunity for their peers to give them feedback, right? So if you're the instructor, okay, let's talk about this. What did they do really well in this situation? What did they handle well? And then where are there opportunities for improvement? Where could we have gone differently, or how could they have handled a specific situation differently? And putting that onus on the students to support each other, but you're also assessing both the ones that performed and the ones that are providing the feedback simultaneously.
I love that. I know Professor Silberstein loves that. Every year at the UA ITP week, he gets to be the customer and gets to play this role for instructors that are going to be in front of a classroom. And it's quite interesting, even at the instructor level, how many instructors struggle from this, but yet learn from this.
Exactly. And I think sometimes the best way to learn is by doing, especially when you're in in a field like this. And then the other type of example, and this is more traditional, right? So you have this sort of hands-on experience, you're working and manipulating equipment. And what makes this different or unique is that it really has those scaffolds built in. So it has that step-by-step direction on how to use the equipment, how to complete the process, so that one, they're following the directions, but they're simultaneously figuring out, okay, this is what the directions say. Now, how does this actually work when I'm manipulating this equipment and how I'm using it in this particular instance?
Nice. Very clearly defined.
Yeah. And so then we get into these higher levels where it's a little stickier and it's a little bit more complex and you're thinking a little bit more deeply, right? And you're problem solving. So I love these kinds of simulations because, and I'll just play this video so you can kind of get a feel for what this looks like. But essentially, the goal of this is I'm given a situation just like you were in the previous example, but the difference is here, I'm working in a sandbox environment, meaning I'm not going to hurt myself coming in and working with this equipment if this is the first time I'm really exposed to a unit. And so in this example, though, a lot of the step-by-step guidance is removed. This is just showing you, okay, go check the thermostat or remove this plate or verify that this wire is secure. And it's giving them the opportunity to troubleshoot in that instance using the knowledge that they have and the tools they have access to in this environment to manipulate the situation, right? And determine, oh, did I follow that step correctly? Or did I just do something that might have either injured myself or ruined the equipment?
Yeah.
And made it worse.
Yeah, let the smoke out without letting the smoke out.
And then the last phase, so when we bring this all together, I've combined the last two into one category. And part of that is because I think when we talk about these more hands-on industries, right, this idea of evaluate and create often go hand in hand because you're doing them simultaneously. It's almost hard to do one without the other. So evaluate might be I'm comparing and contrasting different types of units and how they operate, whereas create might be, okay, I've now understood how this works and I can design and modify it to either make it work or actually like fully assembling some type of unit to put it together. And, when you do, and I think it's you end up doing these things in conjunction with one another. And so the last example I kind of have here is it's a different type of lab where you're manipulating and working with equipment, but a lot of those scaffolds are removed. So you're now working with probably more dangerous, more technical equipment, right? And you as the instructor are observing and watching, but you have sort of trusted that they've reached this point where they've had access and they've used all of this equipment at least once, so they're familiar with it. And now they're really showing their demonstration of how to put it all together and make a finished product.
Absolutely. Yeah, because there's so many things that could be done wrong along the way. I mean, they're really getting creative at this point.
Exactly. And then the piece that we talked about brings this all together is this idea of feedback. And, we understand the reality. At the end of the day, there is only one of you often in the classroom, and there are many learners in your classroom. And as much as we would love to be able to clone ourselves to help each and every student as much as we can, the reality is, it's hard to do that, right? It's hard to give students equal attention and equal time as much as we might want to. And so sometimes we have to think about creative ways to incorporate feedback. And so this is something at Cengage that we've really tried to think about strategically, and how do we support instructors in doing that in meaningful ways that's effective and also supporting them in how they're giving their instruction. So one of the things that we hear a lot about right now in the industry is AI. And while you might have mixed feelings about it and its use and its place in the classroom, I think at the end of the day, we have to acknowledge it's not going anywhere, right? So it's always be with us. So if you can't beat them, join them, right?
Perfect it.
One of the things that we've been exploring and is, how do we use the features of AI to support student learning in this process? And so one of the ways we've explored this is with our student AI, which is going to be coming into our products starting in the fall for us. And these are designed essentially to support students to get to that point of independent learning. So it's going to help address knowledge gaps without giving them the answers. So I might say, I don't understand what this question's asking me. And it's going to say, okay, let's look at this word. What do you recall about this particular topic? And it's going to force them to go through those levels of learning on their own to reinforce those ideas. And what's great about this and what we're really excited about is that it's not an open AI, meaning that it is only trained on the textbook that it is associated with. So it's not getting, it's a trusted source, right? Because that is the biggest concern, I think, for instructors is, well, if they go out and use ChatGPT, how do I know that what they're looking at is accurate? And the thing is, you don't, right? At the end of the day.
No, absolutely. Yeah, creating from your own trusted sources is very important. I've talked to instructors that are starting to use AI feedback. And it is solely off from their content and they're downloading it as their own app. So it's only using their content and not open source content. And that's a great way of doing that because now we're validating only what's being taught from that curriculum.
And you're controlling the power that this technology has and the benefits that it can provide, but in a way that is safe and secure and giving them the information that they need.
Absolutely. We look at AI as from many different aspects, and it could be many different things. But when we look at it as a tool, you just have to understand what kind of tool is it? Is it a tool that I'm going to craft to do a job to save me time? And if you look at it from that angle, it is incredibly powerful and incredibly useful.
And one of the things that I always used to think about when I was teaching is, when all this new technology gets introduced, it can be overwhelming and it can be frustrating because you feel like so much of it is out of your control. And on some level, it is. But part of it is also, okay, if I know that this is something that is a reality for me and for my students moving forward, not only how do I use it to my benefit in a way that I feel comfortable with, but also how do I teach my students to use it in a way that when they are using it on their own and they are using it independently, they have the skills and the resources to verify that what AI is giving them is accurate, or how to vet what they're looking at, or just think a little bit more critically about the information that's being presented.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it.
And then the last piece of this is some reporting features. So we, as educators often have access to a ton of data, and it's hard to always figure out, how is this useful to me, right? Like, what benefit does this really serve? And so some of the features we've been working on that you might be able to implement in your own courses is, okay, if I assigned a quiz, a multiple choice quiz, I can look at these reports and I can see themes. Was there a question that all of them got wrong or a lot of them got wrong? And is that because of the way that I taught the content? Is it the way the question was phrased? Is it just something that just didn't sink in, and why was that the case, right? And so what we always try to encourage is, use this data to help influence how you show up each and every day, right? We have access to all these tools and technologies. So how can I use this data that I'm being given to influence how I might pivot my instruction and think a little bit differently? Or, I always used to ask my students, we talked about this way. Is there another way? Like, what would make more sense to you if I were to demonstrate this differently? Like, what's more relatable for you, and how do you enjoy learning in this process?
Such a good point. We have to be open to learning new delivery methods and learning new skill sets, and it's okay. I mean, when we think back about ourselves as technicians, when we moved from one technology of equipment into the next, we invested into learning for ourselves. We understood the product until we could teach it to somebody else, or at least teach it to ourselves so that we could become technicians. And it made us a better technician. And as educators, we're simply doing that. We're picking up new tools. It's taking a little bit of training, but as we grow and mature as educators and instructors, it's the tools and these support networks and connections that helps us do that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, that's kind of all I have for us today.
No, that's perfect.
Yeah. So just to kind of review, these were all the things that we covered. We talked a lot about how do we think about instructional design, right? We start with goals and assessments, and then we focus on content. We've talked about how do we build that knowledge over the course of a lesson, over a unit, over a program. And then we've kind of talked about some actionable strategies that hopefully were beneficial to you and you might be able to think about using in your day-to-day instruction. And I've also added my contact information here. So, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or, you're just curious about some of the things I talked about and you're interested in learning more. I'm happy to chat about it.
Yeah, and please do. We encourage you to all look at the resources that you have available. ESCO is here to provide you with all the tools and resources that you need. And part of that is with an educational partner like Cengage. Brandon had just asked a question. He's not with an institution. Is he able to still access content?
Yes. There are still ways for you to access it. So you can still go to things like Cengage.com and you can access either a book or a mind tap on your own. You don't necessarily need to be associated with an institution to do that.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And so if you have any problems with that, please reach out, Brandon, connect with Cengage, look at all the different training resources. If you're looking for component visualization, I encourage you to dive deeper into Visual 3D Academy. It's a educational program that we've been putting together to have those digital visual environments for the equipment and components. There's a QR that will take you directly to Cengage. So if you didn't grab the Cengage.com, just scan that and I'll get it right over to that. This was a lot of fun. I really appreciate hanging out with you. I love learning new educational skills myself. I'm going through this and I'm thinking, about different places where I put some of my own assessments and my own content. And like one of the things that I always love to do when I'm doing an airflow training, especially on ECMs, is where is your airflow going to be? What is your airflow setting for this air handler or furnace based on this system? Because they have to understand the unit, they have to read the instruction manual, they have to know where those adjustments are. And I keep looking at that going, that's actually pretty advanced. I need to make sure that it is in the proper, I would consider it escalation of my training. Mm-hmm. And so I encourage all of you to be thinking about how your delivery is. Are you putting all of the content in the right level? Are you introducing those concepts? Then are you challenging to make sure that they're retaining that information? Are you going deeper in the assessments, making sure that they're retaining that and they're able to apply that they're able to understand the products to the point where they can actually recite it back to you or demonstrate it? It's quite the intriguing process when you look at it and you go, that's all I got to do. I just got to plug my content and my program into this and then go get the resources to fill in the content so I don't have to create it all myself. And we'll go, yeah, it can be.
It can be.
Well, fantastic. So are you going to be at any conferences coming up? If somebody wants to hang out, say hello at any time?
Yeah, not in the near future. We will definitely be at HVAC Excellence next year in 2027. So definitely keep an eye out for us there. But we don't have anything else other than that right now on the horizon.
Okay. All right. Well, I encourage you all to reach out. I'm grateful, Carolyn, that you spent time with us and Cengage for allowing this educational partnership to happen today. And for all of you that are joining us, make sure to pass this on to one of your fellow educators, one of your students. Have them hit that subscribe so that they can get the notifications when we go live every week. Every week, we bring a different instructor here for you. You are our audience. We're not here to sell you anything. We all hope that you buy our products along the way, and that's a known, but we are here to educate you and to provide you with the resources so that you are successful. And partners like Cengage makes that happen. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure being here.
We look forward to seeing you all again next week on Did You Know, the ESCO HVAC show. Everybody have a wonderful evening. Bye.